Hello everyone, I'm Zahid from Talks at Innovation Valley, and today we have very amazing guest with us, David Lee. David Lee is a learning designer designing authentic learning experience where students have the opportunity to apply their knowledge and skills through the creative problem solving approach. David is a STEAM specialist, formerly design and innovation specialist at Singapore American School. David is also an Apple Distinguished Educator for a program offered by the Apple. So, first of all, I really warm welcome you, David.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to chat about creativity and innovation.
You're welcome. So, audience, today our topic is creativity, design thinking, and problem solving. So, David, before we jump to the topic and questions, is I and my audience would love to know your personal journey. I mean, your professional journey and your personal story so far, from where you got your education and when you joined the industry and professional career, and how you got to this point, and you are working as a STEAM specialist and also as an Apple distinguished educator. How was all your this journey? Share your experience.
Yeah. I'm originally from America, from California. I was born there and raised there. And I would say growing up, I definitely had a fixed mindset. And I thought that only special people had these innate ability to be successful. And I totally thought that I didn't have those things. So I was going to, basically live my life by getting by. Um, but then once I exited high school and got into college, I decided to be an educator because I just felt like it was something that I've always been around children, and I loved teaching. I had opportunities to teach, and so I thought it would be a good field to be in. Um, and also, it was an opportunity for me to maybe help bring some change to education. And once I exited the teacher credential program and I started teaching, I started to realize that my fixed mindset started to shift into more of a growth mindset, and I realized that um, I do have these capabilities. It's just that I never got to practice them. I never got to use them, and that's why I thought so lowly of my abilities. But once I exited the education system and I started working, I quickly realized um, I am creative and I am able to problem solve and do those type of things. I didn't just because I wasn't in the special class with all the smart kids who are labeled as problem solvers and creative. I can be creative as well. And so that whole shift in my mindset like really changed me. And I started to explore, okay, well, if I'm able to change and shift my mindset, I want other people, other students who are just like me, alter their thinking. And so that's where I got really into project-based learning. It's a teaching method where you try to create these authentic real world experiences, learning experiences. And then I got into design thinking, which is a tool that people use to be creative problem solvers within that real world context, to be innovative. And so that's what I've been doing pretty much my whole career, is promoting project-based learning, design thinking. And now I do it specifically within the STEM field, or STEM education, sorry. And that, I think that's why I'm so passionate and I create so much content around these things. And I try to share it to as many teachers as possible: project-based learning, design thinking, STEM, etc., those kind of things.
All right. So, David, can you please explain what creativity means and to you, and how it relates to the problem solving and design thinking?
Creativity. So to me, creativity just means to think beyond the obvious, to try different things. Obviously, the obvious ideas can work, but there are some contexts, real world contexts, that will require for you to think differently. And if you have that skill, then problem solving becomes slightly easier, because you're not, if you're given a problem and you have maybe one or two options or solutions you think of, um, they may work. But if you start with a lot of different ideas, um, you have more options and more opportunities, I feel like. And so creativity to me is definitely seeing things in a different way and trying different things.
All right. So, David, when we talk about the education sector and especially the schooling, most of the teachers are not creative and innovative. They just have certain syllabus, curriculum, and they just follow the line. So, how teachers can be creative and innovative like you? What are the tips?
Um, I think it's a great question. I think teacher. Okay, so the way I would answer that is that I personally believe that everyone is creative. Actually, everyone is creative, and teachers are creative. It's just that we don't get to practice it. And I think traditionally, traditional education, especially the education I went through, um, it was great education, but it didn't really require me to be creative and problem solve in general. I got so much anxiety when the teachers did not give me step by step process, or a step by step procedure. Like in science, I remember, we were given, okay, this is what you do, this, and then test, and you analyze the data, and you look at the results. But if a teacher decided, let's try not giving you the procedure and you figuring out, I would have panicked. And I just think we just don't get the opportunity to be creative. And so what I would say is just to start and practice. And project-based learning for me is a great way to start, because it requires you to not think in a silo of one discipline or one way of one lesson, but it kind of forces you to think holistically, look at all your standards and how those standards are applied in the real world, and then bring that experience to students. And that does require some creativity and problem solving. Um, so yeah, I would say that everyone is creative. It's just that we have to practice it. And I think project-based learning is a great vehicle for that practice.
All right. So, David, what role does design thinking play in the process of problem solving and innovation?
Yeah. So um, a lot of times, so when we exit the education system, we are given projects, and these projects do require creative problem solving. Um, Even the project-based learning experiences that I provide students, it requires them to figure things out, ask questions, investigate, and create something that can be testable. Um, and that's why I feel like, for me, project-based learning was one piece to the puzzle. But what was missing, because that piece was what the teachers used, the tool that they used to design things. But what was missing was what the students use, the tool that students use. And that's where design thinking um, came in. It's a great it's a great scaffold for any beginner to go through a design process, but then also embed language about language and ideas about specific mindsets that make people actually creative and ultimately innovative. Um, An example for that is when I was so if you do project-based learning and you have students try to do creative problem solving, it's just naturally they're not used to that and they struggle. um, and there was not particular language for students to use to navigate through those problems. So that's why I feel like design thinking is so valuable. It provides students with that.
All right. David, when you see your own experience at school and when you're teaching the students or in general, can you share some examples, some stories, how design thinking has been successfully applied to solve some problems or complex problems?
Design complex problems. Yeah, let me think of a specific unit. So I got to work with a teacher named Tracy Blair, a fourth grade teacher, and she loves the idea of design thinking and project-based learning. And so we had students identify a problem that they face in their daily life, and we asked them to solve that problem. But we provided them with the context of they would be biomimicry engineers. So engineers who look at nature and see how nature solves problems, and then take those ideas and implement it into their solutions. And what was powerful about that embedding using design thinking is um, the whole idea of failure is just part of the process. That um, that when they test, the first initial prototype won't work, but it's a great way to um, identify a failure point and improve on that point. And it just becomes part of the process, and it becomes, it's not a big deal. And what I saw was that the culture of students not wanting to mess up, it changed because of these design thinking principles that were embedded throughout the whole process. Um, yeah, and also I would say like empathy, just understanding people's perspective is such a big part of problem solving that I think students definitely need to have. For example, like students had to create a museum exhibit, and those projects, museum projects are very popular, but design thinking forces you to not only think of you're the designer of the exhibit, but you are forced to think of the people who visit the exhibits, and you learn from the experts who actually design it. You go to the museum and observe how they do it. It's not just, oh, make something. It's more trying to get as much information, trying to empathize as many visitors as possible. So in that sense, design thinking has definitely been a powerful tool and has changed the maker culture of these units.
All right. David, how can organizations encourage a culture of creativity and design thinking among their employees?
um wow. Within an organization, okay. um I would say the first step would be um limiting as much as possible the hierarchy within an organization, because you need design thinking is a tool that it empowers people to take action. One of the principles of design thinking is bias towards action, and you can't have that if there's too much hierarchy where people are scared to make decisions and are self-managing. Organizations are great at creating the vision and mission, um, but what great organizations have are people who can actually have autonomy to um, make that vision possible. And sometimes hierarchy creates a culture of that, um, that limits that type of bias towards action. So I would probably say start with that. I think, was that the question? How would you start? How would an organization start?
Yeah, and can you please add some of the more techniques and strategies that you recommend for enhancing the creativity, problem solving, and innovation?
I mean, a simple one is just if you're in a meeting and you're already scared to share ideas, there's something wrong there. And one of the design thinking um, strategies is to not to defer judgment. So um, when you hear you want everybody within the meeting, within the team, to share as many ideas as they can, because that's how we can be actually creative. Um, so that's one strategy I would recommend, is making sure that there are norms, team norms, where everyone understands that when we are brainstorming, when there's a problem and we're brainstorming, we are not judging these ideas. We're putting them on paper. Once we have a lot of ideas, we can go through them and sift through which ones are best based on the criteria you created. But initially, we are not judging ideas.
All right. Interesting tips. What are some common barriers or challenges that people face when trying to think creatively and solve problems innovatively, and how those challenges could be overcome?
Um, that's a great question. I think one thing that stifles creativity is fear. Um, I've witnessed certain teams where they're given a problem or a project and they kind of freeze. And my guess is because they're fearful of whatever they decide or whatever they come up with, it's not going to work. And that's something that I feel like each individual within us needs to work on, is to identify that um, that we are feeling fear, but then break that idea down and find out what is actually making us fearful. Because ultimately, in my experience, when I do that, I find that it's not really that scary. It's just these emotions that we feel and stories that we tell ourselves that stop us, and that can stifle creativity, definitely.
All right. David, in your opinion, what are the key qualities or characteristics that make someone a successful problem solver?
A successful problem solver. Um, yeah. So I I find that the the people I look up to, the great problem solvers, they are really good at looking at things holistically, um, seeing things as with as systems, and seeing how different parts are working together, and not seeing everything in a linear way. Because the projects that most people are given, and even at schools, like we are all constantly introducing new initiatives. There might be a problem, and so we try to think of um, a solution. It's very important for us to see things in a systems thinking way, um, and try to find certain points within the system that we can leverage to um, actually solve the problem. So yeah, I would say seeing things within as systems.
All right. How does creativity and design thinking contribute to the development of new products, services, or solutions in different industries?
Um, is this specifically for education or just in general?
education and also as journal in the multiple industries. You can cover both aspects.
And you said creativity and design thinking.
Yeah, creativity and
Okay.
design thinking.
Yeah. So I could just explain it within education. So like any initiative that is introduced within a school, um, I think obviously you need to be analytical, um, but y- but you but it also requires creativity and empathy. Really meaning the whole process is human centered. So always going back to the people, the stakeholders within the school. So thinking about the teachers and the students, whatever your solution is, communicating it to them, making sure that they understand, making sure that whatever you're pushing, they can use well and they understand the why, etc. So really, even with this whole systems thinking idea, you're constantly going back to the people who are involved within this project, who will actually be using your solution. And I think that's definitely, you can see that within any field, with apps, um, like TikTok, for example, how they have really um, empathize with users and how they like to use apps, and they figure it out by understanding the human mind. um, so yeah, I feel like it really impacts all different types of fields.
Right. What relationship do you think is between the creativity, design thinking, and entrepreneurship?
Oh, okay. Entrepreneurship, yeah. Um so I think they're not there. If you saw a Venn diagram, you could see how they're all interconnected to each other. Basically, if creativity, entrepreneurship, and design thinking had their own circles, that middle part of the Venn diagram is that perfect place that you want every student to become. Um, without Everyone can be an entrepreneur, but I think the best ones have to be creative. They have to think in different ways. It can't just be what's always been. And design thinking, I feel like, packages things for an entrepreneur because it's so action oriented, and it's so human centered. It's all constantly thinking about people. And so I think creativity and design thinking are extremely needed within entrepreneurship.
Right. How do you approach solving? I mean, how do you approach solving complex problems that require a balance between creativity and practicality?
Yeah, I think and I could explain that within the education realm. Some people think of design thinking as just fluff, and what people don't understand is that without knowledge, without a solid foundation of knowledge and skills in content standards, you can't actually be creative. And I think perfect example is Albert Einstein. He was only able to come up with these amazing theories because he had obviously a strong foundation of knowledge and skills in science, but he was also creative. And Ruth Noller, a mathematician um, who worked on a creative problem solving process, she created this equation: creativity equals, and created this formula. And within creativity, it equals, you need knowledge, skills, and also a specific attitude as well. And so um, that's something I think people need to understand when we're talking about creativity. When we're talking about design thinking, we are also talking about the foundational knowledge and skills that we all need. But the creativity part, the design thinking part, is the cherry on top, where I feel like it makes those people who are already intelligent and have the knowledge and skills go beyond that and become really successful.
All right. David, are there any specific tools or resources that you find particularly helpful for stimulating creativity or facilitating design thinking processes, and that you would like to recommend to the audience too?
Yeah, so I mean, um, a lot of the information I got, uh, I've I've learned from is from IDEO, the design firm that popularized design thinking, and the founder is David Kelly, who also coined the term design thinking. Um, yeah, I look at their work all the time, um, and for educators, for teachers who want to equip students with design thinking, I recommend um, my book. It's called Design Thinking in the Classroom, where it provides practical examples of how I use design thinking with students, and how I've created these learning experiences that are optimal for design thinking.
All right. So, David, keeping in view the emerging technologies and the speed of change is too much. AI, generative AI, how do you see the future of creativity, design thinking, and problem solving with reference to the technological advancements?
Yeah. I mean, currently, I just feel like these tools are extremely valuable for any creative problem solver. So even as an educator, I can see how the tools can help with the ideation process, but it's still going to take a design thinker who has the right mindsets to utilize these tools to create um, something awesome. I just feel like these tools are just here to help us, um, and yeah, I personally use them for my work as well. So
All right. Uh, David, what is Apple Distinguished Educators program by the Apple, and why Apple started this? What was the vision? And what are the activities that you are doing with reference to this program in your school?
yeah, so Apple, I believe, created this program to just highlight educators who are using Apple technology and using innovative teaching and learning strategies or methods and approaches, um, currently, and together with Apple products and innovative practices. And so any educator can apply. They have to create a video and just talk about the things that they do. And so Apple takes a look at those videos and application and selects educators to come in to, I believe it's like, I got to go visit. I got to go visit Australia with a cohort of people who got accepted to the program, and we just got training. We got professional development, and for me personally, being in the program, I am truly grateful because it has created a community for me. Sometimes I do feel like, even working at my school, I feel lonely sometimes with some of my ideas. Um, but the ADE program that you're talking about, it's provided me with a huge community where we think similarly. We think beyond the obvious, and we are trying to get away from the traditional way of teaching, and trying new things. And so, community has been a big plus for me within the program.
Was this idea of Apple Distinguished Educators was initiated by the Steve Jobs or as an organization or what?
I don't think so. I my guess, I'm not sure, but I my guess is that it started probably from Apple's education department, because I think they do have their own department for specifically for education.
Got it. Uh, Thank you so much, David, for joining today's podcast. And trust me, it was really, really insightful. And your conversation was so interesting and relevant and like very, very interesting for the learning for all my audience. In the last is not the question, but request that I do every guest that comes to my show. What advice, what message would you like to give to my audience, which are educators, entrepreneurs, startup founders, and university students, school teachers? Any message, any message that could inspire them, change their thinking.
Yeah. Anything, I just feel like if you're passionate about something, if you have a message that you want to communicate, and for me, it's been project-based learning and design thinking. Um, any message that you have, um, storytelling is extremely important. So I would recommend getting into storytelling, learning how to communicate your message in a clear, engaging, and ultimately an inspiring way where it makes people take action. I think that'd be extremely valuable. That's one advice that I would have.
Since you mentioned the storytelling, so I will take this edge to request you. Can you please elaborate a little bit what is storytelling and how somebody could be good at storytelling?
You're basically creating a compelling story based on all this information. So one way to look at it is you have all of these different parts. I forgot who said this, but I think an IDEO designer said this. But it's kind of like a constellation. You have all these stars, and looking at all these stars, it's beautiful, but it's hard to comprehend and understand. But if you take certain points, certain stars, and create a picture, it's easier to comprehend. And I think that's what great storytelling is. You have professors who just know so much and write books, right? But then they have to condense all their knowledge into a presentation, and sometimes it's very dry and very, it's not engaging. Like they're just talking, right? A storyteller, a great storyteller, would take the all those ideas and structure it in a way that takes the audience in an emotional journey, that like movies do, right? And a great example of this is the Lord of the Rings. There's so many books and so many pages of information, but what the filmmakers had to do was take all that information and create a story within these movies. And that's what I mean, is to take all this information and synthesize it into something that is engaging, and ultimately inspiring.